All right, there we go. Ready for another radio show on this Wednesday, January 8th, 2025. This is Up North News Radio. I'm Pat Kreitlow here in chilly Chippewa Falls. Nice to have you along on this Wednesday where we're going to visit with Up North News reporter Selena Heller. And we are going to talk about concerns about the mumps. Mumps, measles, rubella, things like that. Remember, we heard Senator Tammy Baldwin say the other day she's very concerned about Robert Kennedy Jr. becoming the Health and Human Services Secretary because it could lead to an increase in things like that. So we're going to hear from a county health director in central Wisconsin about concerns about the mumps. So we'll hear from Selena in our second hour, along with Bryn Horton from the Wisconsin Public Education Network. We'll talk about what kinds of things the legislature will be considering in its new session that could impact Wisconsin education. Yesterday was the deadline for filing papers to be on the spring election ballot, so we now know who exactly is running for a seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court and who is running to be the next or the current state superintendent of public instruction. The incumbent is running, but so are two challengers. So there will be a primary next month in that particular election. We'll tell you more about that. Melissa Baldoff has our climate check in our first hour. We'll talk about a new network of EV charging stations around the state that's starting to get activated thanks to President Biden. And then we'll talk about President-elect Trump, talking about acquiring Greenland and Panama and changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico. And yeah, I'm tired. It's Wednesday, January 8th. We'll get the show started at 6:06 across the Civic Media Radio Network. We'll see you soon.
across Wisconsin from Civic Media. This is Up North News Radio. Now, live from our Lake Minnesota studio, here's the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Brightlow.
Well, hey there, Wisconsin. Good morning. It is 6:06 on this Wednesday morning, January 8th. Another beautiful day to have you here up north, live from Lake Minnesota, from wherever you're listening across the Civic Media Radio Network, or maybe on the app, maybe by podcast, maybe on social media, where we've got Roger already making comments on Facebook, and Tony as well up in Ashland, normally commenting on YouTube, is already making comments. He's already anticipating today's show. First comment on the Facebook page from Tony: do we have to talk about Trump? Yeah, we do, but we're going to put it in perspective, and that's the important part here. We're not going to get all caught up in a lot of the nonsense, but to put it in perspective of he likes to talk about nonsense because it distracts people from focusing on what he's not getting done for you and the campaign promises, I guess you could call them, that he made and is continuing and is going to continue breaking as he did the last time around. So we've got a busy morning ahead here to tell you all about it. Selena Heller will be here in our second hour, and we will be talking about the mumps. Yeah, that's what we have to talk about now. Recall that we had Senator Tammy Baldwin. We heard from her a couple days back. Her concerns about Robert Kennedy Jr. potentially being the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and what that means for some basic preventable things like the mumps. We're going to hear from a county health director in central Wisconsin about those concerns. We'll hear from Bryn Horton in this week's Homeroom segment as well. And that's when we're going to talk about the new legislature that went into session on Monday and what specific things might they be talking about in terms of education. We often talk about education spending, the big dollar amounts that are involved, but what does it really mean at the classroom level and the hometown level? We'll talk to Bryn a bit about that. In our first hour, Melissa Baldoff picks up our weekly climate checks to start a new year, and we will talk about something that is getting done around Wisconsin for the next generation of vehicles. And those would be EVs, electric vehicles, and a network of charging stations. No longer just talk, it's action. New stations became active this week in places like here in Chippewa Falls and elsewhere. So we will talk a bit about that. Brittany Merlot's forecast. And by the way, that forecast for everywhere but here, I mean, here it's cold, single digits again for most of us, but we don't have wildfires that are causing the evacuations of tens of thousands of people like in Southern California. We're not facing a snowstorm, potential ice storm like they are in the South this week, just on top of the one that went through parts of the central part of the country, just a couple of days ago. So I'll take cold and quiet. Thank you very much. But we will get our own forecast. And along the way, you can join us at 855-75-CIVIC, 855-752-4842. Or you can leave a question, or you can text us or call us through the Civic Media app. Or you can leave a comment, like some of the listeners have done already, on our Facebook or our YouTube page. And you can email us, radio@upnorthnewswi.com. Or just visit our website, upnorthnewswi.com, and see some of the stories that we're working on. I normally ask a question at the start of the show, and I kind of breezed right past it because there's so much to talk about already. But my question for today was, who remembers 4th and 26? How many Packer fans are still scarred? I'm guessing it's a small number. But it's a small number that still gets a little flustered. Greg Bach is at Radio Park in Racine. 4th and 26 have any significance to you anymore?
Football.
I'm going to take that as a no.
No idea.
Yeah.
Is it the street you were on, 4th and 26 in New York one day when that lady came down with the cans and went all the way up to the sky?
No, it was not.
Okay,
it was a single disastrous play when the Packers were playing the Philadelphia Eagles, in the playoffs, January 11th, 2004. It looked like the Packers had the game in hand and were going to advance in the playoffs.
Wait, let me guess. They biff it.
They did. The Eagles had 4th and 26. Packer fans, myself included, were giddy. We were on the verge of winning this playoff game. And no, the Eagles completed that pass, went on and scored, and eliminated the Packers in the postseason. And there was a Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel article about that a day or two ago, asking, what exactly went wrong on 4th and 26, breaking down the play. If you know anything about our sports segments, we do not break down plays here for you. We just tell you there was, for years afterwards, 4th and 26 haunted Packer fans, and trust me, they'll be thinking about that on Sunday afternoon when we play the Eagles as well. However, you can catch that Packers-Eagles game across the Civic Media Radio Network on Sunday pregame starting at 1 o'clock on stations in Racine, Kenosha, Richland Center, and Park Falls. Head to civicmedia.us to learn more. But there is not what you would call palpable energy ahead of that playoff game on Sunday.
Yeah.
No.
Although I will. Okay, here's the thing: is that I did not think that last Sunday was a foregone conclusion. I never think the Packers are just going to beat the Bears.
Mm-hmm.
What I would like from the Bears fans now is stop acting like you just won your 14th Super Bowl. Like, I have Bear friends who are like, "There we go, man." I'm like, first of all, your season sucked. Second of all, you haven't beat us in a while. Just be like, that was a good victory, man. Yeah. Let's see if we can do it next season too. No, instead they're acting like they are.
Oh, but they did with at the start of every year, with every new quarterback they get. They're like, this is the one. This is the Messiah. And it never is. I mean, they have to go overboard on these little victories because the big ones are so elusive, shall we say?
Yeah, they're. Let's see here. Oh, I guess you know how like every 5 years now the Brewers will celebrate their trip to the World Series,
the 82 World Series, yeah,
and losing.
Yes.
And I feel like now the Bears can. This is the year. No, next year is going to be the year where they can celebrate 40 years of
of the Super Bowl shuffle.
Of glory in your rearview mirror.
And the only thing that can top that is that the Minnesota Vikings have been in existence now for 63 years and have no Super Bowl ring.
They have no Super Bowl ever?
No. They went to 4 Super Bowls. They went to 4 in pretty short order back when I was a kid out there in the Twin Cities. Although I guess with age, I tend to exaggerate. I tell people when they go, how come you're not a Vikings fan anymore? And I tell them, during the 1970s, the Packers lost 12 Super Bowls in a row. A lot of people don't know that.
Wait, the Packers did?
I mean, the Vikings. The Vikings lost 12 Super Bowls. Yeah, that joke fell flat when you get the team wrong, doesn't it?
Well, I was just like, holy cow, I didn't know that.
No, the Vikings lost 4 Super Bowls, and thank goodness the Buffalo Bills have lost like 5 or something like that to make Vikings fans feel better. So now, the Vikings and Lions, they're having their year. Okay. Again, good luck. We're not going to be like going overboard the way that they did when they beat the Packers now and then. If you win it, hey, I'll be happy for you. I actually will be.
I just love this story in which the theme is basically Pat Kreitlow doesn't like no losers. That's why I don't like the Vikings anymore. They're losers.
No, I married a cute farm girl from near Green Bay, and that was I decided to move to Wisconsin and live happily ever after.
Gross.
And here I am. I have watched people move in from Minnesota and from Illinois. I think of Bob Gallagher here in the Chippewa Valley, longtime anchor, long-suffering Bears fan.
Dan Schumacher.
Dan Schumacher. My dad, before his passing, was here in Wisconsin in the Chippewa Valley for some 40 years, suffering with the Vikings. And people, well, it's your hometown. You got to support your hometown. Well, that hasn't been my hometown in decades.
Yeah.
This is my hometown. This is my hometown team here. Once I knew I was moving to Wisconsin for good, it really wasn't a big lift to say bye to the Vikings. This is my neighborhood. These are my neighbors. This is my team. It's not that tough. I'll be happy if the hometown teams of the past win, But I got to live in the now, man.
Live in the now,
I
man.
got to live in the now.
My wife's father, rest his soul, was a lifelong Cubs, Bears, all the Chicago teams that I despise.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife doesn't really get into any of the sports, but she roots for the Bears when they play because of her family, and her mom's a Bears and Cubs fan too. But if I take her to a Brewers game, I've taken to her Brewers game where they play the Cubs, she will sit there and go, "I'm just happy everyone's playing well." She goes,
it's a healthy attitude.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that,
Yeah.
And yep, you have to kind of enjoy the mingling of the fan bases. Sherry and I were just talking. We were heading down 29, approaching the Chippewa Valley, and recalling that back when it was a little rickety 2-lane highway, there was a bar there called what was it called? The Halfway Point or something like that. And half the bar was painted green and gold, and half the bar, inside and outside, was painted purple and gold.
Yeah.
And it was like the place for Vikings and Packers fans to intermingle. And there was never a rumble or anything like that. It wasn't the Sharks and the Jets or something. They all got along, and they cheered for their teams. Yay, sports,
Yay, sports. There's the title right there. Yay, sports.
Yay, sports. We just need more of that attitude, which would help us out. But as mentioned, Packers, Eagles, whatever the result, we'll be out there cheering for the green and gold on Sunday afternoon, and you can listen across the Civic Media Radio Network. Let me tell you about a couple of other Civic Media notes here as well. There is a daily newsletter, part of their mission to bring you real news and great conversation. Subscribe to the Civic Media newsletter by going to civicmedia.us/email. And, of course, you can catch the Up North News daily newsletter every weekday morning. Sign up for it over at UpNorthNewsWI.com. There is a train theme in some of the stories, including the Empire Builder, the Amtrak line that runs from Chicago all the way to Seattle, and how you can take a segment of it through Wisconsin. Sherry and I took the Empire Builder from St. Paul to Seattle as our honeymoon. No regrets there. That was a wonderful trip through the mountains, and I would strongly recommend it. So learn more about some of the rail trips that make Wisconsin great in our newsletter, UpNorthNewsWI.com. Wherever you're listening across Wisconsin on this Wednesday when you're here, you're up north. I'm Pat Kreitlow, and this is the Civic Media Radio Network. Back in a bit. It was on this day in 1966 that the Beatles got their 7th number one album in the U.S., Rubber Soul, would stay atop the album charts for 6 weeks with all kinds of great songs. That and more in today's history lesson segment coming up in a half hour here on Up North News Radio. Temperatures at the bus stop look like this at 6 a.m. It is 3 degrees here in Chippewa Falls, 6 in Hayward. Amory's at 3 right now, Wausau 8, La Crosse 7. It's only 2 degrees in Wisconsin Rapids. Green Bay's at 13, Madison 7, Waukesha 9, and at Radio Park in Racine, it is 12 degrees right now. A little sports at 6:22. We mentioned, of course, the Packers playing Philadelphia on Sunday, and you can hear that game on Civic Media radio stations. Go to the website to learn more. But also, let's see, we've got the Badger women's basketball team lost out west to Washington last night, falling to 1-4 in Big Ten play. The Badger women will be home next on Saturday afternoon to face 8th-ranked Maryland. The 7th-ranked Marquette men's basketball team beat Georgetown at Fiserv Forum last night, 74-66. They are off until next Tuesday when they will travel to DePaul. And the Milwaukee Bucks are home tonight against San Antonio. And a couple of other radio notes. The Badger men's basketball team will next play Friday against the Minnesota Gophers. Coverage begins at 5 o'clock Friday on several Civic Media stations and on the Civic Media app as well. The number one ranked in the country Badger women's hockey team will be home this weekend against Minnesota State, Saturday and Sunday. Those games are already sold out. The Badger men's hockey team will be home this weekend, taking on LIU Friday and Saturday. Tomorrow will be a national day of mourning for the state funeral for former President Jimmy Carter. So it's worth noting that that does have some significance in everyday life. And this is typical when a former president passes away on the day of their funeral. So President Biden has ordered that all executive departments and agencies of the federal government shall be closed tomorrow, January 9th, except those as necessary for national security, defense, and other public need. Federal employees will be paid for the day. The post office will not have mail delivery tomorrow. Post offices will be closed tomorrow, but there will still be limited package delivery service. The New York Stock Exchange will be closed. The NASDAQ will be closed, as well as the U.S. Supreme Court and other federal courts, the Library of Congress, and plenty of other federal offices. So just be aware of that tomorrow for the state funeral for the final farewell to Jimmy Carter, who is lying in state at the United States Capitol. Will be at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. tomorrow, and then buried in Plains, Georgia. So we move from the final farewell to a good, decent, service-driven man who served as the 39th president to the person who's going to become the 47th president in less than 2 weeks now. Donald Trump gave a news conference, allegedly, yesterday. I always have to use that because it's actually more like just a rambling speech that he allows to be interrupted by questions, and he does not necessarily answer the questions. He, again, said some ridiculous things that would, for any other president, be groundbreaking news. But the national media, even after all these years, continues to treat him as more of an entertainer than as a leader whose crazy utterances have real consequences on global security, on people's lives, on health, you name it. So, look, we're not going to get overly caught up in the things that he said yesterday. In fact, I rather treat this somewhat like what I said about Ron Johnson after he somehow managed to win re-election a couple of years ago, is that we're going to pass along a couple of the crazy things to remind you that there are these people in this office who somehow garnered the votes, but certainly do not have any real talent for being good stewards of the office. You know, Ron Johnson's occupying a seat. He's continued to be there to block legislation and to stir up trouble, but he isn't really doing anybody any good. Same's going to be said for Donald Trump. So, yeah, yesterday he talked again about acquiring Greenland from Denmark. And of course, the Danes aren't really up on that idea. Neither is all of Europe, because they know this is really something that Vladimir Putin would love to have. You would eventually see Trump offering some kind of a partnership, with Russia in the name of peace, et cetera, et cetera. And Trump again talked about, somehow taking back the Panama Canal from the Panamanian people, a treaty that was negotiated and passed, coincidentally, ironically, by Jimmy Carter, as a way to once again say America is not an empire and we don't go around conquering other people's lands. So it was turned back over. Now Trump is stirring up trouble there. He also went on to say that he's going to single-handedly change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. And again, I mean, look, what's the basis for that? It's racism. Let's not kid ourselves here. He used the opportunity to say more garbage about Mexico and Mexicans. But we mention these things so that we can then move on to what counts. He's got nothing to offer. All he's got is power for the sake of power, for himself, for his family, for the business deals. He's not going to use this power for you. He's going to provide the clown show. Like using a Sharpie to move a hurricane path into the Gulf of Mexico, not the Gulf of America. It reminds me a lot of the Wisconsin legislature, and their first order of business this week is to pass a proposed constitutional amendment to make it harder to vote. If you're elderly, if you don't drive, if you live in a poorer neighborhood and it's tougher for you to get an ID. They're not working on funding for our schools. They're not working on affordable health care. They're not working on tax savings for the middle class. They're not working on protecting clean water. They're not working on reducing gun violence. They're attacking the trans community in Congress. They're attacking voting rights in the legislature, because these are all sideshows. There is no main event for you if you thought for a moment that either Trump or Congress or the legislature was doing this to bring down the price of eggs. Well, then I've got some shoreline on the Gulf of Mexico to offer you. Back with Melissa Baldoff next. You're Up North.
It's electric.
Welcome back on this Wednesday morning, back into the swing of things for 2025, which includes our Wednesday climate check with Melissa Baldoff. Melissa, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. You have a good holiday season?
I did. Yeah, it's been a good year so far. Had some wonderful, relaxing time down in Florida, visiting my family, which is always great. So, yeah, it was good to get away, but it's good to be back. Although I did enjoy some nice warm weather in Florida, although not as warm as I had hoped it would be. We got a little bit of cool, relatively cool weather down there, but nice to be home now.
Yes, and goodness knows they need something to offset what the weather's like most of the year, and we'll get to that in
That's
just a
true.
little bit in terms of global weather here. But earlier I was talking about the basically the diversions that President-elect Trump is throwing out there, sideshows about Greenland and the Panama Canal Zone and what was the other one? Oh, renaming the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America. And it's really all just to point out that there have been no accomplishments. There will be no accomplishments as far, based on the first administration that he had. But other people do know how to get things done. And you can see that this week in Wisconsin with what President Biden has done under the bipartisan infrastructure law. And you're seeing it this time around at some quick trips, but you're going to see more of them all around Wisconsin. And we're talking about a network of EV charging stations.
Yes, this is, I think, incredibly exciting news here in Wisconsin. And, this is something that, happens when federal and state government work together and when they partner with the private sector, when they listen to communities, and when they listen to businesses, when they listen to industry, and listen to science, and make things happen.
Here are some of the details on it. It's through something called the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, and Wisconsin's going to get $78 million total in federal funds to bolster EV infrastructure. This first wave of projects, 23 million, will support some 53 projects that included some stations that have come online now at quick trip stores here in Chippewa Falls, Ashland, Menominee. Others are going to be coming.
So it's really exciting to know that we're seeing the first EV charging stations that have been funded by federal dollars, by the bipartisan infrastructure law enacted by President Biden. Uh, Governor Evers, signed state legislation to allow the state DOT to receive and administer those funds, to help Wisconsin really build out that infrastructure and have that network, to build that across the state. We know that that's something that is important to a lot of businesses, to a lot of travelers, especially in some of our places, up north, where the tourism industry really relies on folks who are going to want to be able to have access to a charging infrastructure as they're thinking about how they're making their decisions. Just more and more people want to know that they're going to have charging available, whether it's people who live in Wisconsin or people who are visiting Wisconsin. So it's really great to know that we're embracing that in Wisconsin.
And the whole point of this is to create what's called Wisconsin's alternative fuel corridors. And what that means is these are all charging stations built within 1 mile of a highway intersection or an interstate exit, so that folks traveling around the state with EVs, if they're on one of these corridors, they know that they never have to worry about not finding a place to charge up. That's good for tourism. That's good for the environment. It's just a win all around.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And this is something that is really, building on uh, the governor's efforts all along to build a strong clean energy economy. That's something that Governor Evers, from day one, has supported, is reducing our carbon footprint, reducing emissions. He and then Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes set up the Governor's Task Force on Climate Change. They prioritize supporting hybrid vehicles, more electric vehicles, infrastructure. They really wanted to make sure that we were doing everything we could to accelerate the development of electric vehicles, of EV charging infrastructure, and support that transition. We know that this is an opportunity for our state, to be a part of the manufacturing and the equipment. This is something where we can be a part of developing more jobs in that industry, and really have an opportunity to be a part of the growth in that industry. So this is going to be a win all around for everybody, and it's exciting to see it happen.
And along with Governor Evers and former Lieutenant Governor Barnes working on this, you had Senator Tammy Baldwin working on it from the infrastructure law, saying in a release that she says, quote, "I'm thrilled the funding that I worked hard to deliver is expanding this electric vehicle infrastructure and helping improve the air our children breathe, creating more opportunities for Wisconsin workers to make it all possible. As more Wisconsinites are choosing electric vehicles, we need to make sure that they have charging stations across the state so they can get to school, get outside, do business." And she says this is just the beginning, with more stations coming online in the coming months. So we want to start with the good news. And there it is. There's the good news from a Wisconsin standpoint. But when we talk about the climate, of course, not just the good things that we're doing, but we're doing it for the reason that the climate has been changing. And there was an article recently in the Journal Sentinel. Caitlin Luby and Madeline Heim put it together, saying Wisconsin had its warmest winter on record last time around. And I mean, we already know what a warm year or a record year this has been worldwide. And again, for the deniers out there, Melissa, I mean, this is data. You can't argue with the data.
No, I mean, you can't. So this is according to the Wisconsin State Climatology Office, and the data that they are tracking here shows that December 2023 to February 2024, warmest winter in the state since it began keeping records in 1895. So this is pretty significant, almost 10 degrees warmer, and that is quite a big difference for our state. This is something that everybody has to be paying attention to. Wisconsin's not an outlier. The United States as a whole experienced the warmest winter on record. We've talked about, obviously, globally, we're seeing these trends. We saw a whole unprecedented series of extreme weather. We saw a, February tornado in Wisconsin. We saw extreme weather events across the country, across the world. But, this is something that is not necessarily going to get any better, especially if there aren't some changes that we make.
Right, especially in our use of fossil fuels, and it's not just the warmer temperatures, but rainfall has increased about 5 inches since 1950, according to the Wisconsin Initiative on Climate Change most recent report. And that, of course, has an economic impact. The Center for Public Integrity says extreme weather events will cost Wisconsin $16 billion over the next 15 years. So again, and by the way, we see it on the Great Lakes too, where ice cover for only the second time last winter did not reach 5%, according to data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So the data is all there saying what's happening right in front of us. It's a matter of, how do you react to it? So having had that data for 2024, let's see how people are reacting to it. And you brought up to my attention an interesting article about one particular group of people affected by the climate. And I'm going to have you talk about that one in a sec. But let's set it up with the obvious one first. You think of people that work outside all the time, like construction workers. And this is where I point out that in Texas and in Florida, those are the two most noteworthy. These are states that have made it illegal for local governments to mandate water breaks. There were places like Austin and Dallas that passed rules that said outdoor workers are entitled to a 10-minute water break every 4 hours. Sheesh, Melissa, heaven forbid, that this happened, especially given, like, just for example, in the decade leading up to 2021, at least 42 workers in Texas died because of excessive heat. But like you pointed out to me, it's not just the obvious things like construction workers. All kinds of folks are being impacted by our increasingly warmer global weather.
I came across a piece from Inside Climate News that highlighted the impact on people who are delivering our food. People talk these days about the gig economy, and for some people that is a good thing because it enables them some freedom to make money when and how they choose to. And for some people, they are working these kinds of jobs, driving for DoorDash or Uber Eats or Grubhub, out of necessity, because they've got to work a couple jobs or they've got to pick up an extra shift to make ends meet because they're not making enough at their day job to pay all the bills. So we've got a lot of people working in these kinds of jobs where they are delivering food in these more extreme weather conditions. And that is not a job where you can avoid the weather. And some of these folks might be, already dealing with any kind of health issues, but these kinds of jobs don't come with health insurance. They don't come with any kind of protection. They don't come with a union. So these folks are not having a whole lot of protection in the workplace.
And they don't have protections either from their employer or, as we just talked about, from the state. It could be, again, a state government in Texas or Florida that makes it a crime for a local unit of government to try to help these folks make sure they get a break. So when you look right at it, Melissa, the thing that's going to help them most are the ones that are organizing, the ones that are unionizing, that can put some pressure on, collectively bargain and say, hey, we'll do these things in this gig economy, but you got to make the conditions more humane. I mean, that's the least we can expect as we deal with how a changing climate affects our workforce.
We know that whenever our unions are organizing for better conditions, better pay, that rising tide is going to lift everybody up, and we want to see better conditions, better pay for everybody, and we want to see it extend to all of our workers.
Right.
And in the meantime, until we can get better conditions, better pay for the folks that are driving DoorDash and bringing our Uber Eats, delivering pizza from your local shop. When you're making an order, especially if it's snowstorm, if it's raining, if it's really hot out, make sure you're tipping them well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just the heat. I'm looking here, smoke from wildfires is also a big thing, as well as the floods and the snowstorms that they face. Melissa Baldoff helping us remember the people that are working and dealing with a changing climate as well. Melissa, thanks so much as always. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
We will have today's history lesson coming up next. This is Up North News Radio, live from Chippewa Falls on the Civic Media Radio Network. Well, look what the cat dragged in.
Good.
How are you? All right. Good deal. Okay, we'll get going in 10 seconds here. Time for today's history lesson on this Wednesday, January 8th. It was 90 years ago today in Tupelo, Mississippi, that the world was first introduced to Elvis Aaron Presley. This day in 1935, passed away in 1977, Elvis's birthday today. Today's history lesson also includes a rare Wednesday visit from one Selena Heller, Up North News reporter, who's with us today. Ms. Heller, how are you?
I'm good. We are recovering from Christmas aftermath. I see in this room downstairs. This room is destroyed from kids who are playing.
It's such a basic mom reaction. This room is destroyed. Okay.
Oh boy, that's a mess. It was.
Yeah. By the way, Rob and Tigerton wanted to wish Melissa Kay a good morning. I should have mentioned Rob beforehand. Melissa's off this week. Much like Kristen Lyerly's, the holiday vacations just kind of roll on, staggered. As it were. So she'll be back next Wednesday, and Elizabeth will be back in this slot next Wednesday, but Elizabeth was on Monday, so Selena's on today. So apart from a destroyed room, everything else all right post-holidays?
Yes, we got a karaoke machine.
Oh,
so there's been a lot of singing, announcing everything.
I love the announcing.
Interviews, reading, but we read books on it, so that's good too.
I'll bet your neighbors love you. Love you.
Yeah.
Any Elvis yet that she's done for her karaoke?
No Elvis. No.
Okay, we'll work on that.
A lot of Bye 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 and a lot of Taylor Swift.
You're so lucky. I remember when we had a karaoke machine. I was in the Disney Tunes era for the daughters. So we got a lot of Part of Your World and things like that.
Oh, those are nice.
It was nice. It was very nice. So it's Elvis's birthday today, and another legend was born this day. In 1947, the late, great David Bowie. Is there any chance that you know David Bowie's birth name? Oh. Well, you don't raise your hand over there, Greg. You've got the script right in front of you. Come on.
I knew it before I had the script.
Okay. It was.
I can't remember.
He was actually born Davy Jones in London this day in 1947, but he changed his name at 18 to avoid confusion with that other guy in the Monkees. So David Jones became David Bowie because he liked the name from the Bowie knife. So David Bowie, born this day in 1947. Another rock and roll birthday today. This would be Joseph Ronosky. You know him better as Loverboy's Mike Reno.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're back at Trader and Trapper, kids. Welcome to Shenanigans on Water Street. Disc jockey Jim McAteer spinning the records for you.
Oh, man.
Big sale at the mall, kids.
Selena and I are, London Square Mall. Take that double-decker bus over there. Selena and I are having terrible Water Street flashbacks right now. We mentioned earlier on this day in 1966, Rubber Soul was #1 on the album charts. On this day in 1980, Prince made his national television debut with this song on NBC's The Midnight Special. It's weird to have like some of these 70 stations on. I know you'll find this hard to believe, but I sometimes will listen to 70s stations. And to hear Prince, you associate him with the 80s, but he actually had a couple of hits like this one in 1979. All right, let's move way up to just a couple of years back, 2021. So 4 years ago now, A then unknown 17-year-old, Olivia Rodrigo, not a total unknown. She was an actress on various Disney shows,
Okay.
but she released her debut single, which went to #1 for 8 weeks. This is Driver's License.
Okay, now that I'm gone, I guess you didn't mean what you wrote in that song about me.
Did this turn you into an Olivia Rodrigo fan right out of the gate, Selena?
No.
No. I recall the Saturday Night Live skit where they're all singing it. All these guys around a bar pool table are singing it. They're really getting into the song, and I had no idea who she was. And it would be a couple of more years before I'd finally hear some songs and go, oh hey, she's pretty good. So yeah, but it was 4 years ago now that she first came on the scene musically with Driver's License. We have to note the passing yesterday of Peter Yarrow from Peter, Paul, and Mary. The New York Times writes Peter Yarrow, whose caring and righteous vocals for the trio Peter, Paul, and Mary established them as one of the most popular folk acts of the 1960s, died of cancer Tuesday at his home on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. He was 86, wrote and sang lead on one of his most famous songs. Which, by the way, he again says he can show you the poem it was written after, not a drug reference.
Yeah, I never thought that. I never thought this was about drugs.
No. So here's my Peter Yarrow story. He sang at one of my campaign events.
Oh,
Yep. In 2012, while running for Congress, Dave Obey, Congressman Dave Obey, was coming to Wausau. He and Peter Yarrow would perform together, Dave on his harmonica and Peter on his guitar. And so Peter Yarrow came out to Wausau, and he and Dave Obey put on a little performance for my campaign staff.
that's so nice.
It was a very cool moment. So
I would have loved to have seen Peter and David on stage live.
Oh, and they did numerous times, actually. So, again, Peter Yarrow passing away at 86. This is National Bubble Bath Day, National Argyle Day, English Toffee, and Winter Skin Relief, which reminds me, we're going to need that winter skin relief. Brittany Merlot's forecast is coming up right after news here on Up North News Radio from Lake Wissota on the Civic Media Radio Network.
Noble kings and princes would bow.
All righty. So we've got your two videos. So still 1 and 2 as you have them numbered in there.
Yep.
Okay. What's our lead into it? I mean, what's the basis behind the story? Because I just know the Tammy Baldwin quote, but is there something going on already, or is this just concern about vaccinations?
Because they had a confirmed case in the county.
In Clark County?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okie dokie. All right. Sounds good. So we'll have that. Let me get down to that part here.
I see the CDC has us at 5 cases. They updated a calendar January 3rd, and we have 5 cases in the state.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Sounds like we're good to go. So I'll pull you out of the waiting room in a little bit.
Okay.
How's Brittany this morning?
Hey, good. Can you guys hear me all right?
We hear you perfectly, wonderfully.
Let me hear you, Brittany. Let me hear you.
Hello, hello.
Okay. All right.
Good. Yeah.
All right, you passed inspection. Good job.
There you go.
Okay.
All across Wisconsin from Civic Media, this is Up North News Radio. Now, live from our Lake Minnesota studio, here's the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Brightlow.
Well, good morning. Welcome back to Up North News Radio, brought to you by Courier Newsroom and carried by our friends on the Civic Media Radio Network. It is 7:06 on this Wednesday morning, January 8th, 2025. Nice to have you along. Coming up this hour, we'll be talking to Bryn Horton from the Wisconsin Public Education Network as part of our Homeroom segment. She also serves on the Sun Prairie School Board, if I'm not mistaken. But with the Public Education Network, she helps track things that are moving through the Wisconsin legislature that could impact education. And so we'll talk more about what the legislature could be considering education related this year, beyond, of course, the state budget and other obvious debates that go on around that. We'll talk to Up North News reporter Selena Heller in just a bit. Mumps, it's on the rise again in Wisconsin and across the country. It is preventable. There is a vaccine. We will talk more about that coming up in just a bit. But first, meteorologist Brittany Merlot joins us as well. So is Greg Bach in Racine. Can't miss Greg there. Hi, Greg. Rob says, good morning from Tigerton. It is cloudy and 9 degrees. I had to get the garbage and recycling out as my township Germania moved garbage day from Thursday to Wednesday. I hate when that happens. Yesterday got salt from Wittenberg, getting ready when we get the next snow and ice storm that will come eventually. Yeah, but not like down south, as Brittany's probably going to tell us. And she says, or he says, when you mentioned Tupelo, Mississippi, as we talked about Elvis's birthday in our last segment, being a highway lover, Highway 45 that goes through Tupelo is the same highway that starts in Michigan, runs to Mobile, Alabama, and runs just 5 miles from my house in Tigerton. So Tigerton, connects Tupelo, Mississippi with Highway 45. So there you go, Rob. Just get on the road and move. Let's see. Tony writes on YouTube, my daughter asked me when it would be warm out again, Brittany. Are you working on that?
No, I'm not. No way.
That is
March,
not in
April.
not in the wheelhouse of our ice queen over here.
DJ Flipmix just destroying children's dreams. Good job.
Well, the
What snow
kids
days
here,
were?
Emery's
was it?
class wants snow, so
See?
That's what I was
Kids don't
thinking.
know
I
what
thought
they
kids wanted
want.
snow days.
They
Kids-
can't vote. They don't know what they want. They just
Well,
they
Rob,
want to play in the snow.
Rob writes in on YouTube, I want snow. Well, yeah, make a cash register sound right behind that.
Yeah,
Of course
exactly.
you do. Why wouldn't you? But this sounds rather concerning, what's about to hit the South.
Yes.
They're going to get a winter storm. How far south are we talking here?
We're talking hard hit into Dallas area, Texas,
gosh.
Arkansas. Yes,
They
they're
are
under winter
not
storm
ready.
warnings.
No.
No, they're not.
No.
I mean, they're
my
looking
goodness.
at crazy ice accumulations all the way onto the western side of the state and then eastern side towards Dallas. That's where they're looking at over a half a foot of snowfall, potentially 10 inches. That's massive.
Let me tell this story again. I haven't told it for a while here, but I have a daughter that lives in Idaho, but did move to Texas for about a year and a half, a couple of years back. Packed the moving van, headed down there for an opportunity. And when they got there, she realized that one of the boxes she meant to put in a storage locker, back in Idaho, was on the truck. And she's in Texas going, what am I going to do with all these hats and gloves from the kids? Well, the next day is when that infamous cold snap hit. What about 3 years ago, whatever it was?
Yeah.
And they were heroes. Her then 5-year-old comes up and says, "My friends are cold. Can they have hats and gloves?" And so all the hats and gloves got distributed to these Texas kids who were not ready, and they're about to get walloped again. I do feel bad when that happens. It's not, you don't expect that there.
No. No, you don't. I don't think they have the equipment to clear that either. So they're going to need some help. Hopefully, everybody just stays home and stays inside, and nothing too
Yes.
crazy happens.
Yeah, exactly. So what do we have around here? It's still quiet and cold?
Yeah, basically. High temperatures in the great north will be about in the upper teens today. For the rest of the state, low 20s. Winds are calm. We do have some flurries that could make its way through central Wisconsin, but otherwise, lake effect snow very, very close to Lake Superior. Probably an inch or two. Nothing too crazy going on here. But as we go through tomorrow, that system down south starts to join with a system here. So it's kind of pushing a big front through the area. Now, we're not going to be hit, obviously, the hardest. That stays far, far south of us. But we are looking at a light accumulation potentially tomorrow and into Friday. That looks maybe like 1 to 2 inches up north to about a half an inch for down south. So nothing major, but we are looking at some snow on the way through tomorrow and Friday. And then, of course, some warmer temperatures into the weekend and maybe more snow on Sunday.
Okay. See, now that we're used to. We can be ready for that.
Yes.
Here's the funny. So I have some friends who moved from Wisconsin to Florida, and she said the other day that they got some sort of advisory because it was going to be cold. So dress the kids warm. It was going to be like 40 degrees. And I said, last week I brought Emery to school, and I said, you're probably going to go into school right away because with the wind chill, it was 5 below. And so I'm like, okay, so we're going to go in. You're going to go in right away. No, we got there. The kids were outside. And I said,
Of course they were.
What's the threshold? And 10 below with the wind chill. So they still had to play outside.
Yes, absolutely. They can play in the ice bowl. Put them up on the frozen tundra of Lambeau. They can do it. We are hardy folk up here.
We are. Yes. It's something to be proud of.
Yeah. Well, more or we're just crazy that way. Brittany, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, you too.
All right. Reminder, as always, you can join us here on the show, 855-75-CIVIC by phone or by text, or you can use the Civic Media app to call or text us. And if you're watching us on the Up North News YouTube page, the Up North News Facebook page, or the Civic Media Facebook page, put a little something in the comment section there as well. So the latest story that Selena Heller is working on deals with the fact that mumps, measles, these kinds of things are on the rise again, things that are preventable. I'm looking at the website for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and it says Wisconsin is now up to 5 reported mumps cases, which is nothing like Illinois with 23 or Michigan with 15. But still, Selena, this is something that can be serious, especially for the young and the old, and we're already seeing it in central Wisconsin.
Yeah, so Clark County had a confirmed case just the other day. So that's what they've been talking about and getting the word out. And, so here's some numbers. I got to throw these at you guys. So the United States started the vaccine program in 1967. So around that time, would you have any idea, guess how many cases there were across the United States?
Across the U.S.? No.
Yes.
What do we have?
152,209.
Ooh.
So then jump to say 2003 because of the vaccine program and everything else. That number is down to 231.
That's a vaccine. That's what a vaccine can do. And again, for people who go, well, it's not zero. No, it's not supposed to. But that's pretty effective. Unfortunately, the COVID pandemic and the intentional misinformation around that vaccine has, I'm sure, played a role in the rise in mumps cases.
Mm-hmm. So the numbers say they have increased beginning in 2006 across the country. So the Clark County case, there's the one confirmed case. It's mumps is contagious disease. It's easily spread from person to person. So don't share utensils, drinks, chapsticks, anything like that. Cover your mouth when you cough or sneeze. Always remember those things. Wash your hands. Brittany Mays is the health director in Clark County, and I talked with her last night, and she talks about symptoms.
So mumps is very easily spread, or obviously, of course, meaning it's contagious from person to person. And how that is spread is through direct contact of droplets in the air. So an infected person can spread those droplets when they talk, cough, sneeze, or share cups or dishes with other people. And sometimes usually the symptoms typically start with a fever, and then it can also lead to headaches, muscle aches, tiredness, and loss of appetite. And then after a few days, the glands in and around your mouth may start to swell. And this swelling can be very painful, and it can also cause puffy cheeks and a puffy neck. Some individuals also have trouble swallowing when this occurs.
And so let's turn from symptoms to prevention. Obviously, you've got the vaccine and some of the tips that you just talked about.
Yep. So she talks about, when people should get a vaccination. And so here's Brittany Mays talking about prevention.
The best way to prevent the mumps is to receive the MMR vaccine, also known as the measles, mumps, and rubella. And it's best to get vaccinated before an exposure happens. So before an outbreak occurs, we encourage individuals to get vaccinated for all the vaccines in which they are able to receive. The MMR vaccine is not used as a prevention tool after an exposure has already taken place. And it's not effective at helping those who have already been infected with mumps. However, again, the vaccination can prevent disease for potential future exposures and herd immunity for preventing future community outbreaks. So it's really critical. We strongly encourage vaccination. A little bit on the vaccination, children should routinely get 2 doses of the MMR vaccine, with the first dose at age 12 through 15 months, and then that second dose at ages 4 through 6. Adults who have not received the MMR vaccine should receive 1 dose if they do not have any evidence of immunity to measles, mumps, or rubella.
I mean, that's all good advice, Selena, but the numbers are not looking good. I mean, the rate of vaccination in Wisconsin for children entering kindergarten, I mean, the CDC target is 95%. In Wisconsin, it's more like in the mid 80s in terms of vaccination. That is extremely troubling.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I didn't know that number. So yeah.
I was just looking at something that and Eric Gunn from the Wisconsin Examiner wrote about this not too long ago. Here's the one that really sticks out, though: the vaccination rate for kids heading into kindergarten for polio is 86%. Well, I'm just letting it sit out there, folks. 86%. There are 14% of people with kids going into kindergarten that you need to go find them and shake them by the shoulders to try to prevent whatever else could conceivably come down the line. Selena Heller keeping us updated on the vaccinations there. And prior to that, karaoke coming soon to performances at the Heller household. Thanks to that wonderful Christmas present. Selena, thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. When we come back, we're going to talk about what's on the ballot for February and April. Yes, there will be an important primary election for one of the statewide races that will be decided on April 1st. We'll talk about the race for DPI State Superintendent and State Supreme Court on the way. This is Up North News Radio, live from Lake Wissota on the Civic Media Radio Network. There we go. Did I steal any of your thunder? Any other points you want to get out there, or are we good?
Nope, that's good.
All right. Groovy. All right. Sounds good. What is today, Wednesday? So, yeah, I'll see you at 9:05.
Okay. See you then.
All right. Thanks. Bye. David Bowie was born 78 years ago today. Part of today's history lesson that you get every weekday morning at 6:50 here on Up North News Radio. I'm Pat Kreitlow. Nice to have you here at just about 7:22 now. Civic Media has a way for you to stay up to date with news in your community every weekday, even when you can't be by your radio, with Civic Media's local news roundup podcasts. You can listen at the Civic Media website or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, at Up North News, we have a daily newsletter as well. Sign up for that at our website, upnorthnewswi.com. Click subscribe in the banner on top of our homepage. Stories there today related to some great train trips that you can take in Wisconsin. Some of them are along a standard Amtrak line. Some are specialty trains that you could take for like little dinner jaunts, essentially. So learn more about that by signing up for our newsletter. Well, we are going to have a couple of big elections in Wisconsin on April 1st. But in at least one of them, there will also be a primary in February. The two big elections that are coming up, one is for an open seat on the Wisconsin State Supreme Court. There is a liberal Justice Ann Walsh Bradley who is retiring. So that leads to an open seat. And it's fair to say that Republicans and conservatives are going to be coming hard for that seat, because if they win it, they will retake ideological control of the state Supreme Court. Liberals took a 5-4 control of the court with the election of Janet Protasiewicz a couple of years back. It broke a 15-year stranglehold of conservative control over the court. But again, that progressive control could be very short-lived if on April 1st, Scott Walker's former Attorney General, Brad Schimmel, were to win the election. He is the conservative candidate running for this open seat on the state Supreme Court. So the reason this is so important for conservatives as well is that the next couple of seats that come due, because they're on staggered terms, the next couple of seats that come up will be belonging to conservative justices who will be defending their seats. So this is the only opportunity that conservatives might have for the next few years to take control of the court. So you have Brad Schimmel, who is going to be running, as is Dane County Judge Susan Crawford. We've talked to her previously at the start of her campaign for state Supreme Court, and she will join us again next week to talk about her campaign. But as far as former Attorney General Brad Schimmel goes, he had some interesting things to say recently to a far-right radio host in Wisconsin about the January 6th defendants, claiming that they never got, quote, a fair shot in court. So if you've got somebody like Brad Schimmel who's defending the insurrectionist mob and attacking courts, running as a state Supreme Court justice, I want you to keep this part in mind. The Wisconsin Supreme Court was still under conservative control right after the 2020 election. And there were 5 conservative justices at the time, and 4 of them indicated that they were willing to go along with Donald Trump's claim that there was some kind of fraud, which didn't exist, and might have been prepared to delay or even overturn the will of the voters of Wisconsin. If it hadn't been for one conservative justice, Brian Hagedorn, saying there is no evidence of this fraud, get out of here, who knows what could have happened in this state. And don't think it can't happen, because in North Carolina, it may be about to happen. There's a contentious state Supreme Court election going on there. The Republican challenger to the Democratic incumbent is trying to get 60,000 votes thrown out on a technicality. And a Trump-appointed judge this week indicated their willingness to kick this back to the conservative-led North Carolina Supreme Court, and the North Carolina Supreme Court could overturn the results of an election to help a fellow conservative join the court. So we're going to talk about that this later this week as well with my Courier Newsroom colleague Billy Ball from the Cardinal and Pine. And we're going to talk to Ruth Conniff of the Wisconsin Examiner tomorrow morning about the recent comments by Brad Schimmel about the insurrectionists and saying that they couldn't get a fair shake in court. And again, we'll talk to Susan Crawford, who is the progressive candidate for Wisconsin Supreme Court, coming up. So there does not look like there will be a primary in that particular contest because it is only the two candidates, Susan Crawford and Brad Schimmel, and they will face off on April 1st for that state Supreme Court seat. The other big race is for State Superintendent of Public Instruction, leading the DPI, the Department of Public Instruction. The incumbent there, Jill Underly, is running for a second term. But there are also two challengers that have announced. And neither one of them lists themselves as conservative. Jeff Wright, for example, is a fellow superintendent in Wisconsin who has described himself as progressive or Democratic in the past. And then there is another candidate from Wauwatosa, Brittany Kinzer, who has described herself somewhat as a blue dog Democrat, which, depending on your feeling about the term, either indicates a somewhat more conservative Democrat or a practically Republican running as a Democrat. And so there isn't a doubt there that in that particular race, Brittany Kinzer will be asked to be more specific about what she would like to do as state superintendent of public instruction if she were going to win. Similarly, Jeff Wright, who is the superintendent of the Sauk Prairie School District, will be talking more about his candidacy for DPI and what each of them thinks makes them the better candidate than the incumbent, Jill Underly, who's running for that second term. Now, we'll get more into each of their campaigns as time goes on here, but it's worth noting that because there are three candidates, there will be a primary. That primary will be February 18th. And because it's a nonpartisan race, what it means is the three candidates will be whittled down to two. And it doesn't matter their ideology, party, anything like that. The top two candidates on February 18th will advance to the April 1st ballot. Quick note here, Tom and Jackson text in any updates on the important results from the Virginia legislature yesterday. Yes, the two Democrats defended their seats and will continue to control the Virginia legislature. More after this. You're Up North. Good morning, Bryn. How are you?
Morning. How are you? I'm good.
Good. Thank you for being here. How are things in
Yeah, of
Sunny
course.
P?
Oh, wonderful. I would
Yeah.
love to have some snow on the ground, but it's,
Yeah. Are you still on the Sun Prairie School Board?
I am. Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure I had that correct from before. All right. Sounds good. And then, how do you want to take this? I mean, obviously the state budget is the obvious thing, but as far as the email that I sent you in terms of the outline, did that look okay?
Yeah, that looked wonderful.
Okay.
And it's enough too that we don't have to go super in depth. So
Yes. Yep.
it'll be good. Yeah.
Nope. Just a nice introduction to the process. So, all right.
Yeah.
Sounds good. We've got 2 more minutes left in this commercial break. So I'm going to tuck you back in the waiting room and then I'll come get you when the segment gets going.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Thanks. Elvis Presley was born 90 years ago today. Welcome to our homeroom segment that we do every Wednesday morning, talking about the strengths and the threats to public education in Wisconsin. And happy to bring back to the program Bryn Horton, who is on the Sun Prairie School Board, but joins us in her capacity as a legislative tracker for the Wisconsin Public Education Network. Bryn, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. Nice to have you back here, keeping track of what happens in the legislature. It's not a sexy job, and I say that as somebody who's been a legislator, but it's also an extremely important function to figure out what our state lawmakers are doing that will either help or harm education. So when we left off, the state legislature had come back into session on Monday after exactly 300 days of a paid vacation, funded by taxpayers that Republican leadership did. So needless to say, the inbox has only piled up in the interim. We know the big thing, Bryn, is a state budget bill, and we'll cover that in some detail throughout the next few months here. But before we get to the current legislature and the current budget, do you mind walking us through some of the pending legislation that didn't get taken up before their 300-day vacation last year? What are some of the things that could have helped or could have hurt and are back in the inbox for this session?
Sure. So it was a good trip down memory lane, actually, to remember everything, because it has been a while. And there were over 200 bills that went through for education. Well, didn't go through, but got introduced last session for education. So looking through a lot of that, and you can really see what side of the aisle they are coming from just by looking at the benefits and negatives of it. And I would say that there was a big slate of bills introduced by the Dems towards the middle of the session that were about teacher retention, making sure that we could, one of the suggestions was a minimum wage, standard minimum salary for public school teachers across the state, which I think would have been really great for teachers to be able to at least have a set minimum place where they're starting no matter where you go. Then we have our I think every legislative session a bill about when the start of the school year can happen, as that continues to be controlled by the legislature, and that didn't even get a hearing again this time. We had a great study group committee that was formed over the summer before the legislative session around consolidation of school districts, and they introduced a whole slate of bills that never got hearings around how we can make it easier for school districts to consolidate, which is kind of a scary prospect, but also knowing how many districts are in some dire straits with finances right now, it probably would have really helped some school districts feel a little bit more confident about what they would need to do if they had to dissolve or if they needed to consolidate with a neighboring school district. But then we also saw bills around requiring a civics class and required curriculum for that civics class that I believe received a hearing but didn't get any farther than that. We had some bills around parental choice and parental, the voucher programs and the special needs programs on both sides. There was a bill trying to decouple those payments from the general aids that school districts come in. I know for sure that we will see that come up in the next legislative session. That seems to be a pretty hot topic, not just in Wisconsin, but in other states as well. Parental rights was another big topic that didn't get far this time around, but will also come up again. I think this would be the third legislative session that bills have come through for parental rights and outlining what rights parents have for their kids while they're in school. There was legislation around regulating school libraries and public libraries and what kids can and can't check out of those libraries and what libraries would need to notify parents about. And I'm sure that we will see that come up again. There were a couple bills around tax bill transparency, and I know there are some local jurisdictions that do this for their tax bills where they are very clear about money that's going to the school district and where that money is going and what of that money is going to charters and vouchers.
I was going to say, more importantly, how much of it is being skimmed off the top to go to voucher schools, and yet because of that lack of transparency on the tax bill, taxpayers think it's all going to the public school district when in fact it's not. So without looking to pass judgment on all these many bills, that's not my point, but my point is to say that we pay this legislature a full-time salary, around $57,000 a year. They get paid all year long, and yet they didn't hold a floor session from last March 12th until this past Monday. And just by that one answer alone, on education alone, it's clear there was much. It's not like they ran out of things to do and said, well, I guess we'll go home. They just made the decision not to do any more work and let these bills pile up. So they'll be back in some way, shape, or form. So let me ask about one specifically, and that deals with new literacy requirements that, again, the Republican-controlled legislature insisted on. And there was supposed to be $50 million that went to fund them, but in a spat or a temper tantrum from the Joint Finance Committee of the legislature, they've withheld that money. Where are we on that? Are school districts having to fully fund these new literacy programs, or are the programs not getting adopted or changed because there isn't the state funding? What do you know about that at this point?
Yeah, so the law is still in effect, and so districts are still having to go through and meet the requirements of that. It's a roll in. So this year is kind of the transition year, I would say, where we're having, and I say this having the knowledge of it from a school board member as well, of having to shift curriculum if needed away from the 3Qing. The big thing right now is the personalized reading plans that students need to have. The winter testing window is when the new reading screener has to be used as required by law. There's a bunch of requirements that go into effect July 2025 that everybody's working towards right now, and doing it all without any of the support that was what was said was going to occur during the Act 20 bill, which was that DPI was going to be able to hire statewide instructional coaches specifically geared towards helping districts shift over to new curriculum. Because I mean, the reality is that the majority of the districts in Wisconsin are less than 1,000 kids. They don't have instructional coaches or teachers who have spare time to be doing all of the training and the extra work that's going into having to implement this law. And that's what the instructional coaches provided by the state were supposed to be for. And their districts are not getting any of that right now.
And let's again make clear that $50 million did pass the legislature. The governor signed the bill. And yet the Joint Finance Committee is holding up the funds to try to extract some other concessions from Governor Evers. So they've put out this great big unfunded mandate that will be no doubt talked about as part of the budget bill. Okay, so turning to the budget bill, the process starts with Governor Evers making a budget proposal. He will do that next month. Has he signaled what kinds of education-related matters might be in his budget proposal, or is this still a work in progress?
I think in some ways, I think the bones of it are already there. I've heard a lot of talk that it's going to be a lot of the same stuff that he's done in the past. Special ed funding is definitely going to be a focus, and there's a lot of question about what percentage he'll be asking for. I'm sure that there will be a request for mental health support funding. I know that I've also heard that there's renewed interest or ability to think that we are going to refund the Office for School Safety that almost lost funding in the last budget, but because of the shooting that happened at Abundant Life, that will have probably funding again through the next biennium as well because of that. But I do think that it's going to be a lot of the same stuff that he asked for in the last budget that we didn't end up getting. Well,
and for good reason that he's bringing it back up. For folks who, you might have heard this before, but we're going to keep hammering away at this. Special education reimbursement from the state had fallen to 30% and lower in some cases. The legislature bumped it up to about 35%, but this same Republican-controlled legislature for voucher school districts, for private, often religious schools, they reimburse those schools 90% for their special education costs. So there's definitely room for improvement, shall we say, that I'm sure we'll hear from the governor. Same goes on the mental health funding, where he proposed a lot more than what the legislature ultimately gave. So assuming Republicans once again will simply dump the governor's budget bill and start from scratch, have we heard anything from the Republican side as far as any education proposals for this session?
Yeah, I have not heard anything beyond the fact that they think that the education community is asking for too much, that there's no way that they're going to fund the things that the education community is asking for. They're already giving historic amounts of money to the education community. I'll be interested to see. I haven't really heard whether or not they're even talking about doing inflationary increases. I know that the veto for the $325 increase to the revenue cap is still kind of in flux with the legal system. So I don't know how that'll play out in this budget, because I do feel a little bit like the 325 bump to the revenue cap might even be in question if that doesn't make it through the court system as staying in as part of the red line.
Yeah, this was a bump of what, $325 per pupil per year, right?
Per year, yep.
But through the governor's line item veto, he had that annual bump of that amount going for, what was it, 400 years?
Yeah,
something
another
like
400
that.
years. Yeah.
And so I can definitely see room for a compromise there to close the window. but maybe to adjust the dollar amount. So that's one possibly bipartisan thing that could come out of all of this. But in terms of, where the public goes from here, how do folks have input on these matters? So what are the ways that they can either learn more or advocate for something that they just heard about? What role do they play?
Yeah, so the public is a huge. They hear from advocacy groups all the time. We're hopefully chirping in their ear quite a bit. Wisconsin Public Education Network will have a lot of information as budget hearings go on. I would also say that, speaking as a school board member too, like your school board should absolutely know what's going on with the state legislature and with the budget, because it's so impactful for them. And if you want to have a direct line beyond speaking to your legislators, which obviously is a really great thing to do, your school board members are also a great line through to people, because it as a school board member, you're a fellow elected official. And so talking to the rest of the legislature and the legislators is really great. And then also I would say, having the public talk to the legislators, they need to hear from us. And I think people are often afraid to do that, but there's no reason to be. That's what the legislators are there for, to represent you. So
right. And by the way, reaching out to your school board members is also a good way to find out if in fact they are pro-public education, which
yes.
I think a lot of people would assume, but aren't aware that sometimes people who win these school board races are people who are decidedly not there to bolster public education. And so if you reach out to a school board member and the first thing they say is, well, I'm just here to be a good steward of the taxpayer dollar. I mean, that's your red flag right there, that they're going to support cutbacks to public schools in order to benefit private religious voucher schools. But do in fact talk to your school board members, your legislators. There will be things in the education committees of the Assembly and Senate, and of course the Joint Finance Committee. And Bryn Horton follows all of it, and we look forward to getting her updates throughout the legislative session, thanks to the good folks at the Wisconsin Public Education Network. Bryn, nice to hear from you again. Thank you so much for all you do, and we'll touch base again real soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
You bet. All right. Have a great day. And when we come back, Todd Alba from the conveniently named Todd Alba Show will be along, and I'm going to ask him about fact checking and Facebook deciding, that fact checking, that's too politically biased. Political bias in facts. That's where we are these days. Todd's next. You're up north.
When I first saw you, with your smile so tender, my heart was captured.
It's now or never.
Buenos dias.
Buenos dias.
Good day.
Do you watch any of the shows on any of the streaming networks these days?
Name one.
Shrinking on Apple TV.
I've heard great things. I haven't had time.
We caught up with it last night. We finally, finished season 2.
Oh.
Season 3 hasn't even started taping yet, so it's going to be a long time until we see it. Oh, such a good show. My God, it's such a good show. That's
one with Harrison Ford, right?
Yes. Yeah, the one where you think he's just going to mail it in. He does not mail it in. He is really good in this. So yeah, I had to gush. I had to gush about it to somebody. So it was you.
I can't talk about it. I mean, I can tell you I've heard great things, but I haven't watched them. Sorry.
No, that's all right. That's okay.
I can tell you he did not win the Golden Globe. I did watch enough of the Golden Globes. I know that.
Okay. Breaking news from Tinseltown.
Missed it again.
Yep. Oh well. All right. Everything else good?
Yeah.
More or less.
We can talk about the life and times of Peter Yarrow. He left in a jet plane.
Yes. Did you miss my story about him singing at one of my campaign events?
I did miss it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was at.
He and Dave Obie are buddies, and so Dave Obie brought him along once to our office in Wausau, and he performed for the campaign staff. The two of them. It was really cool.
Dave Obie, dead or alive? I'm going to say alive.
He's alive, but obviously he's
legend and alive.
Yes, that's right. Very, very much so on both counts. All righty, here we go. Just for Todd Halba, we've got Mike Reno there, who turns 70 years old, from Loverboy, singing about the kid being hot tonight. Todd
I feel
Halba.
like this should be Todd's new intro music.
It'd work. It'd work. Tony writes in, noticing your glass of orange juice there, and writes in on YouTube, mimosa.
Not proper glassware, Tony, and so no, it's only orange juice, nothing else.
Okay, we just wanted to do a little mental health check there.
Yep.
How are you this morning? And by the way, you could have lied about the orange juice and the mimosa, because Mark Zuckerberg thinks it's okay now that the community will correct you eventually if you're spreading a falsehood. You already see where I'm going with this.
It's true. I saw that.
I haven't talked about it yet, except what I mentioned on with Greg and Jane yesterday morning. But Mark Zuckerberg, basically joining what is now the axis of evil in terms of billionaires, with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, and now Mark Zuckerberg. These three billionaires attaching themselves to the president-elect's posterior. And what could go wrong with three billionaires willing to trash their various platforms in order to get more tax breaks and have more power and all of that? So for Zuckerberg to say, as he did yesterday, that fact checkers are politically biased, and so we're going to get rid of them, it sounds like the kind of thing a cartoon villain would say, and yet this is real life.
Yeah, I've never been one to get my news from Facebook, but I know a lot of people do, and I think it's just another example of why people should not do that. And he said, listen to great programs from Courier News Service and Civic Media and others. Be diverse in your news gathering. And but I know this is a controversial take in some ways, but I have a lot more spam and a lot more just misinformation on my Facebook feed prior to this than I ever have on my Twitter, now X feed, because I don't do the For You, I just do the following. And so now I've gone over to Blue Sky, kind of sort of the new app. But I think maybe more insightful was Mark Cuban, of course, from Shark Tank, and he has this new cost plus drugs company that's really great, and he had a really good take. He's in the IT and tech world, and I thought he had a really good take on it. And he said, because a lot of people are up in arms about all the people that you mentioned, plus Tim Cook at Apple, and go right down the list, are giving $1 million, $2 million to Trump's inauguration. And Cuban said, this is just transactional. And he said it's really about the race for all these companies. It's Apple, ChatGPT, and each one has an AI. And he goes, this AI is the race right now in tech. It's all about AI. And he goes, they're not doing it to get favor from Trump. They just don't want Trump to put his thumb on the scale against them. And he said, and he had a really good point. He said a little bit of this is Biden's fault, because Biden had no interest in tech or getting involved or talking to any of these people. And he said, guess what? Neither does Trump. Neither Trump nor Biden understand tech, but Trump understands transactional things. And this is just transactional. They're paying $1 million, $2 million to keep Trump away from him. I thought that was a really good take.
Here to me, though, is the more important point in this. Mark Zuckerberg had to follow up and make clear that he is still going to have fact checkers on Facebook in Europe because the EU requires it. In other words, one of the worst, cuss word here, words that we ever adopted in this country was deregulation. When platforms like Facebook and the rest need more regulation than ever before, because otherwise this toxic pipeline of disinformation, much of it coming from Russia, just brings down the very democracy that is supposed to guarantee free speech for individuals, not for corporations, but for individuals. And Todd, if there's one thing that gets me worked up, it is that Facebook faced no accountability, no real accountability for what they did in 2016 of allowing so much Russian and Chinese spam. And I heard from so many people in 2016 going, well, I saw this on Facebook about Hillary. I'm like, it's not true. But Facebook did nothing to police it because they're like, we're not a publisher, we're a platform. We don't do anything. We just open up the pipeline. Well, if they can keep fact checkers in Europe, you know what? They can keep fact checkers here, is my view.
They could, sure. They're not going to, but they could.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
And if Biden should be faulted for anything, it's not saying, no, we're bringing the hammer down on this. You can't make millions or billions off of, being a spreader of lies. We wouldn't let TV networks do that. Why do we let these social media platforms do it? I'll never understand.
I wish that our elected officials on both sides of the aisle would take more interest in that kind of stuff, but we all know why they don't. The old dollar sign.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's one of those where we don't have the time today, but it's one of those where I clearly see, you as a former Republican, where you come at this issue, and you clearly see where I'm coming from this issue, and it's one of those frankly refreshing conversations where two people can go, well, I don't quite see it that way, but between the two of us, do we find a way that we can have the best of social media platforms without having the worst of social media platforms? And it's not easy, or it would have been done by now, but I don't know why there aren't more Todd Albas and Pat Kreitlos out there in the legislature to do this.
Right? All of them.
And Greg Bach.
I agree.
Greg Bach for Congress.
Really quickly.
No!
Really quickly, I think maybe the bigger story, honestly, was the fact, was it yesterday or the day before, that they got rid of net neutrality? The new,
that's right up there with it.
That.
God, that was quiet.
And for people that don't understand, the quick version is it means it's going to be more expensive and harder for rural Wisconsinites in particular to get internet.
Yeah, especially broadband, because these big companies can throttle down that speed if they want to help their biggest customers. And yeah, it's going to hurt a lot of folks. Todd Alba will have all kinds of good things to chew on from noon to 2 today. Todd, thank you so much.
Kreitlo included.
Thank you. Him too. Yeah. All right. Thank you, sir. Greg Bach is back in 2 hours for Matt and Air on Air. You can look for him there. Thanks to Bryn Horton, Selena Heller, and Melissa Baldoff, and to you for being here this morning. I'm Pat Kreitlow, here from Lake Wissota. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning up north.